This actually might be one of the hardest things I've ever done for the channel, recording this intro. We got a little bit of a storm coming up the coast, and while these conditions are pretty extreme, definitely not paddling weather, it has me thinking about wind, because here's what I hear from paddlers all the time, that they get caught off guard by the wind. The forecast might say 10 knots for that day, and they round a headland and all of a sudden it's gusting 20. Or conditions feel fine at the launch and then an hour later everything's changed. Maybe you don't know how to tell if the wind is shifting and what does that mean. Conditions are going to end up maybe stronger than you planned for. Most of the time we're caught off guard by the weather because we don't know how to read what's going on and what the wind is actually telling us. It's common to think, as I can't see right now, it's common, friends, to think that you need some sort of advanced meteorological understanding, but the truth is you just need a few simple things to understand the patterns that are happening. 3 patterns, in fact, which is what I want to share with you today, so you're not surprised, so you don't get caught off guard, and so you can paddle with confidence instead of worry. Okay, I gotta get out of these conditions. Let's go inside where I can think and actually talk to you. Now, as paddlers, I hope you have some experience checking weather reports and understanding what the weather's going to do on the day you go paddling. And in that, tied to that is the wind. And this is probably the biggest pain in the butt for us, for paddlers, day in and day out, managing the wind. I think it helps to have a global view on what the wind actually is. So the 30,000-foot view of wind is that it's a difference in pressure. That high pressure systems and low pressure systems, terms you've heard about, create a differential, and the air is trying to equalize between those two. There's also an effect happening, and we're in the northern hemisphere here, so I'm going to share things about the northern hemisphere, that the way the Earth is rotating has an effect on which way these things travel around, and in the southern hemisphere, they're different because of physics. So this general understanding that wind, these large wind systems, weather systems, are created by a difference in pressure is a starting point. Now within that, the piece that I think is really helpful for kayakers is this idea of veering and backing. And this is the thing that I use on the water. Veering is when the wind shifts clockwise. It might go from the south to the west to the north during a paddling day. I think clockwise is time, get it, to pay attention. If you notice a clockwise shift in the northern hemisphere, it means a low pressure system's approaching, or you're moving into a stronger part of that system. It means that the potential for those conditionings worsening is real. Low pressure typically means more unstable, windy, stormy conditions. So what to expect? You can expect maybe the wind to strengthen, the weather to start deteriorating, maybe some storms to come in. The paddler's response here is to stay alert. Consider alternatives or think about altering your plan if you feel that veering, that clockwise shift of wind here in the northern hemisphere. Now, the other side of this is backing. This is when the wind shifts counterclockwise. This might be something that starts from the north, goes to the west, and then shifts around to the south during your paddling day. This is a good news story. This means that the low pressure system is weakening or moving away. It might signal that conditions are improving or at least not getting any worse and may actually start to moderate quite a bit. The weather's stabilizing when you feel this happening. Paddler's response here is you're most likely through the worst of it. You most likely will be able to expect good conditions throughout the rest of the day. So pay attention to the wind direction over 30 or 60 minutes, or when you launch to before lunch and after lunch. What is the wind doing, and have you noticed one of these really large clockwise or counterclockwise? I'm not talking just a few degrees, north to northwest. I'm talking pretty big shifts in the direction that the wind's coming. That's something to pay attention to so you don't get caught off guard. The second helpful thing that experienced paddlers think about is what are the onshore and offshore winds doing? These are predictable daily patterns that are based on the time of day, the time of year, the weather conditions. They may be affected by the larger high and low pressure systems, these synoptic systems as they're called, moving through an area. But these are caused by still a temperature differential, but this time between the land and the sea. In the daytime, the land heats up faster than the ocean, again, because of physics. And that warm air over the land rises and the cool air over the sea rushes in to fill its space. The result is wind blowing from the sea to the land. It typically develops in late morning and might peak in early afternoon, and it could be stronger on hot, sunny days when, again, those background synoptic winds are a little lighter. When those big storms are coming through, you're not going to see as too much mixing of the atmosphere. You're not going to see that change. That's not going to happen. So now in the nighttime, the opposite happens. We get these offshore or land-based breezes. The land cools faster than the water. Cool air over the land sinks and flows towards the warmer ocean, resulting in wind blowing from the land to the sea. Typically develops after sunset, and it's strongest a little bit before dawn. How we can prepare for these is maybe in the summer months if you've got a multi-day trip, or you just want to get out and you know it's going to get really gusty around 2 o'clock, and just get out earlier. You can expect that by mid-afternoon, those shifts are really going to be pronounced. There's a section of coast that this onshore wind experience always happens to me, and it's in Pigeon Hill Bay. There's a beautiful trip that you can leave from Pigeon Hill Launch and go out to Petite Manan Light, maybe go around Bois Boubert Island, and then as you round the north side of Bois Boubert facing south, which is for us the open ocean here, you just get blasted by wind. It's always happened to me that the last 2 miles of this trip are just an upwind slog. It's partially happening due to this onshore wind that happens later in the day, but there's the next topic I want to talk about, how the terrain amplifies the wind. Headlands and land features can amplify the wind, and they work in different ways than these high or low pressure systems, these synoptic systems we've been talking about. These will usually be overridden by these larger high and low pressure systems again, like these high and low synoptic systems really kind of are the big kids on the block, but you may and have probably experienced these other types of terrain-based winds where wind hits a headland and needs to wrap around it, and in wrapping around it, it's amplified. And it might feel worse because at one point you were behind this wind shadow paddling up to this headland, and then you round the headland and all of a sudden you're not only getting the full force of the wind, you're feeling that amplification. Things feel a lot stronger because of where you are. Now the other thing that happens out there with wind, and this is a slightly different effect, is that wind gets forced into gaps. It's a funneling effect. Wind has nowhere to go between two islands. It gets squeezed through and it speeds up as it goes through. Think of putting your thumb on a garden hose or bending a garden hose to get that pressure stronger. It's the same thing, that amplifies. So as you're paddling and you've come up to these places, you can start to predict, I think the wind's going to be a little stronger here, and maybe once I get through this, things will be fine after that. It might not be the large-scale system we're feeling. I have a story here of a time we were paddling in Somme Sound. And Somme Sound on Mount Desert Island is the only fjord on the east coast of the United States. You're surrounded by these 700 or 800 foot mountains in the middle of the national park with this long, deep channel of water. It's an absolutely beautiful place to paddle. And we were paddling towards the mouth. It was sort of the end of the day, so we definitely had the onshore winds happening. We were paddling pretty close to the narrow mouth of this, so some of this funneling effect was happening. And we noticed a motorboat kind of pushed up against the rocks. We couldn't quite figure out what was happening. We paddled a little bit closer because we were trying to stay close to the shore to get as much windbreak as we could. And we found out he was disabled. His motor died. He'd asked me to clip my tow rope onto his motorboat and tow him out a couple hundred yards to a mooring ball, which wasn't going to happen. We still had a long day to go, so it wasn't going to happen. But long story short, I paddled out into the middle of the sound, flagged a motorboat down, and they came over and helped the guy out. But an example of that funneling effect, an onshore wind, and this next thing, that there's an effect that can happen in valleys and channels that they can act like a pipe. Again, the wind is forced to accelerate through these areas, and all of those different types of effects just continue to get amplified. Without knowing that would happen, that beautiful trip up Soame Sound can turn into a really difficult day back and maybe an impossible day back for some paddlers. Now, there are other terms you may have heard of, like katabatic winds. I'm going to briefly mention them. We don't really have these here in Maine, but they're worth knowing. This is when mountains and valleys along the ocean, when cold air settles in those areas, and then the weight of that air literally falls off the side of the mountain and into the ocean. These can be really strong. I know they're a thing on the West Coast in British Columbia, Scotland. We don't really have the right land mass here. I'm sure there are a few places, but it's not really something we tend to worry about. But those are another type of wind that it's worth thinking about where you paddle and what might be happening the day you're paddling. Now, all of this, the synoptic systems, the high and low pressure systems, the onshore, offshore wind, the effects of terrain, those all help build our knowledge. We start with this understanding of what the weather is going to do on a certain day, but then we can really start to refine it and really refine that predictions, because those predictions are predicting a large area, not a local area of what we might experience. For paddlers, the key insight is that forecast might say 10 knots, but the specific geology or time of day or weather could affect that. And knowing what's happening when the weather shifts, because the weather is incredibly dynamic and very difficult to predict, doesn't leave you caught off guard. So that's it. 3 wind patterns and factors that replace hoping with knowing. When you understand veering and backing and recognizing onshore and offshore cycles and start to understand how terrain shapes the wind, you stop being surprised and stop being caught off guard. That surprise and anticipation can become confidence. That's the shift that changes everything, at least for me on the water. If thinking about paddling this way is helpful for you and you want to keep exploring what it means to paddle with confidence and awareness, I've got more episodes that dig into the stories and lessons and what I've come to call the sea mindset side of paddling. I hope understanding the weather in this way is going to help you move from feeling like you're going to get caught off guard to really understanding what's happening. All right, friends. Well, as always, I hope you enjoy your adventures, whatever they are. And until next time, safe paddling. Bye for now.